The process of conversion of complex food substances into simple substances, that is absorbable form, is called digestion, and this occurs with the help of digestive enzymes, that is digestive chemicals. So here digestion is a complex process of mechanical and biochemical methods. So here the digestive system. So what will be digested in this? Generally carbohydrates, proteins, fats, vitamins and minerals. These are absorbed and assimilated into the body. So carbohydrates are the energy sources, protein and fats are the body building sources. And in this the whatever you are seeing in the diagram, that is called as human digestive system. The human digestive system starts with the mouth and ends with the anus, and the mouth opens into a slit called which is the between the lips and the teeth. The space present is called vestibule, and teeth leads into a cavity called as oral cavity or buccal cavity. Buccal cavity leads into pharynx. Pharynx is a junction of nasal cavity with the oral cavity, and at this position a opening is present which is connected with the respiratory system called as glottis. This is covered by a structure called as epiglottis. Is called as epiglottis. So your mouth leads into buccal cavity, buccal cavity leads into pharynx, pharynx leads into esophagus, esophagus leads into a J-shaped stomach called, and stomach will be having three parts called as cardiac, fundic and pyrolic. Pyrolic will be towards the duodenum, cardiac will be towards the esophagus. So esophagus is also called as gastroesophageal splinter, and the splinter which is present between the duodenum and stomach, pyrolic stomach, is called as pyrolic splinter, and this will lead into small intestine. Small intestine will be having the first part called as U-shaped or C-shaped duodenum. The next part, the longest coil part called as jejunum. Jejunum leads into the ileum. Ileum leads into the cecum. At the junction of the cecum, we see a structure called as vermiform appendix. And the cecum leads into the colon. Colon is of three parts: ascending colon, descending colon, transverse colon. Transverse colon will be near to the duodenum, and this colon leads into the rectum, and rectum leads into the anus. Anus will exit out. So here we have five splinters. One is the gastroesophageal splinter, one is the pyrolic splinter, and one is the ileocecal wall, and one are the anus called as the anal splinters. So this will regulate, and the process of digestion. So when you look onto the first part of the oral cavity called as oral cavity. In the oral cavity we have, human beings will have 32 teeth in adult, that is the half part of the body, this side up and down, whatever the number of teeth are present, or this side or this side, the number of teeth present are called as dental formula. Generally on one upper side and one below side, or any one you take, there will be 8 number of teeth. That is, the dental formula is 2 1 2 3. 2 plus 1 3, 3 plus 2 5, 5 plus 3 8. So that is 8 by 8, that is 2 1 2 3 by 2 1 3. This is called as the dental formula, that is approximately 32 teeth. But in the case of the children, we have only 20 teeth, that is 2120. So this is how the number of teeth are present, and our teeth are replaced 2 times in the life cycle of a person. So we are called as diphyodont dentition. The first set of teeth during the child birth, after the birth, and which is removed, is called as temporary teeth or milk teeth, and the second set of teeth which are permanent called as permanent teeth, or the next set of teeth. So here the teeth are useful. There are four types of teeth, that is incisors, canines, premolars and molars. Incisors are for cutting the food, canines are for tearing the food, and premolars are meant for chewing the food, and molars are meant for chewing and grinding the food. And in our mouth we have a specific part which is muscular in nature called as tongue, which is consisting of taste buds, which is meant for mixing up the food as well as also tasting the food with the help of a buds called as taste buds. And the receptors present in the taste buds is called as chemoreceptors. Now coming on to the next part, esophagus, where no digestive enzymes are produced and the digestion continues whichever has occurred, and moves into the next part called as a stomach. Stomach consists of parietal cells, mucosal cells, which are meant for producing the HCl and castral intrinsic factor, which is responsible for the digestion of food, and the pH of HCl is acidic in nature, that is 1.8 to 2.8 or between 2 to 3 pH. So here you are seeing when you come onto the stomach consists of three parts: fundic stomach, cardiac stomach, pyrolic stomach. So cardiac stomach is the opening of the esophagus directly into that. It consists of two types of muscles. One is circular muscles and longitudinal muscles. And when you look onto the digestive tract, the TS structure of digestive tract, here we have four important parts. So the middle one is called lumen. The inner part immediately which is folded to the lumen called as mucosa. Above the mucosa, submucosa. Above the submucosa we have the muscularis, which is the outer part towards the serosa layer is called as inner muscularis, and which is towards the outer side, that is towards the serosa side, is called as outer muscularis, and serosa is the end layer, and generally the submucosa and the muscularis layer will be having certain modifications like glands. And when you are seeing onto the intestine, so from the alimentary canal from the top to bottom is having different modifications, and a finger like projections, which are the modifications of the mucosal layer. Mucosa in the case of the alimentary canal inside the intestine is modified into a finger shaped structures called as villi. Villi are the functional structure and functional units of absorption in the human body. So here we have a specific type of cells called as crypts of Libercune. These are also lined with the brush border appearance cells, and we have a long structure which is supported with the blood vessels, that is arteries and veins, which takes the food, and the outer part of the villi, mucosal epithelium, is with the brush border appearance, and this increases the surface area of absorption. Now when you come on to the glands, so the glands associated with the digestive system are called as digestive glands or exocrine glands, because they secrete their secretions directly into the alimentary canal. In that gastric glands are present inside the stomach itself, and apart from this we can see a leaf-like structure called as pancreas, which is present on the left side near to the spleen is present, and on the right side 2.5 kgs, 1.5 kgs to 2.5 kgs, a double-lobed leaf-like structure called as liver is present. Liver approximately performs 72 functions, but majorly it produces bilirubin and biliverdin by conversion of the red blood cells into the digested. And the specific portal system is present in the case of the in the case of from the intestine to the liver, called as hepatic portal system. And when you talk onto the digestion process, the digestion of the starch, that is the carbohydrate, will start in the mouth and continues up to the intestine. And here the starch is acted with the help of the salivary amylase. That is the salivary amylase is the enzyme present in the saliva of the human body, human mouth, which is having nearly the 6.8, that is slightly acidic pH, where the starch is converted into disaccharides, that is maltose. Maltose will be converted into dextrose or other sugars with the help of maltase enzyme. And coming on to the proteins, peptones and proteases, they will be converted by the trypsin, chymotrypsin or carboxypeptidases into dipeptides, which are produced generally from the pancreatic juice, which are present in the pancreatic juice, and they are helpful in the process of digestion. So the process of digestion of protein starts after the softening of the food by the digestive enzymes in the stomach, then followed by the duodenum. It starts from the duodenum and completely ends in the intestine itself, where the polysaccharides are converted to disaccharides, disaccharides are converted to monosaccharides with the respective enzymes like amylases. And generally fats are first emulsified in by the bile juice, and they will be acted by the lipases, and they will be converted into diglycerides to monoglycerides, and the nucleic acids are converted to, with the help of nucleases, they will be converted to the nucleotidases and nucleosidases. As a result of that, there will be a digestion. The digestion is completed. And generally, when you look onto the saliva composition, saliva is a composition of water, 90% salts, plus enzymes, mucus, and ptyalin and salivary amylase, where the lysosome activity is antibacterial in function. And the duct of gallbladder is called cystic duct. It connects with the hepatic duct, which arises from the liver, to form a duct called as common bile duct. Common bile duct combines with the pancreatic to form the hepatopancreatic duct, and which flows the secretions into the duodenum. So hepatopancreatic duct is hepatopancreatic duct is guarded by a splinter called as splinter of OD. And generally we know that pancreas is also called as exocrine or gland or endocrine gland, where the outer portion will produce digestive juices, that is pancreatic juice, and inner part will produce the endocrine secretions, that is insulin, glucagon and somatostatin. So the complete body is composed of involuntary muscles, and they undergoes the peristalsis, and generally sodium, potassium, chlorine and HCO3 minus ion are the electrolytes present in the saliva of the human body. And renin, here we see renin. Renin is a proteolytic enzyme found in the gastric juice of only infants, and it is helpful for the digestion of milk proteins. And you can also see that the pancreatic juice composition is inactive. Enzymes like trypsinogen, procarboxypeptidases, chymotrypsin, amylases, lipases and nucleases. So here trypsinogen is converted to trypsin by an enzyme called as enterokinase with the intestinal, which is produced from the intestinal mucosa. And when the food is comes into the cecum, the prevention of the food, backward entry of undigested food is prevented because of the ileocecal wall, and all the coherent feces will be combined, and they will be stored in the rectum for a temporary period of time. And the feeling of neuroendocrinal reflex of urge of removing the undigested food is called as excretion, that is the elimination of undigested food in the form of coherent feces is called as elimination process. And when you come on to the digestive system, the disorders of the digestive system, when you see onto the jaundice, vomiting, diarrhea, and constipation are the as well as indigestion are the general disorders. In this, the jaundice is affected. The liver when the liver is affected, which is concerned to the digestive system, the skin and eyes turn yellow or blue due to the deposition of bile pigments, and vomiting is the process of reverse peristalsis of food because of many reasons, or which is a reflex action by our body to control. And diarrhea is a condition, the abnormal frequency of the bowel movement, that is excessive movement of bowel and increased liquidity of fecal discharge is known as diarrhea or motions. And this also reduces the absorption of food. And constipation means motion not coming out, that is the feces are retained in the body, which leads to hemorrhages or hemorrhoids in the body. And indigestion, because of heavy intake of spices food certain times, there is a chances of indigestion. Now when you move on to the next part, that is human respiration. So when you look onto the human respiration means the intake of oxygen and elimination of carbon dioxide from the body, and which is used for the conversion of the food we take, which is assimilated into energy, is done by a process called as respiration. So generally your OT is utilized by the organism indirectly in the breakdown of simple molecules like glucose, amino acids and fatty acids to derive the energy and perform the other activities. So this process of exchange of O2 and CO2 from the atmosphere is known as respiration. So generally the most important organs of the respiratory system are 5 types of organisms. The whole animal kingdom is classified into 5 different types of respiratory organs. That is, the first one, diffusion in the case of protozoans, gills in the case of aquatic animals, lungs in the case of human beings, trachea in the case of insects, and skin in the case of certain amphibians. So this is how the respiratory system is broadly classified, and the major important organ in the human beings or most of the mammalians and terrestrial animals is lungs. Lungs are a balloon shaped structures, which are a pair of balloon structures which are externally covered by a membrane as perivisceral membrane or pleura, and they are filled with a fluid called as pleural fluid, and rib cage, and at the down part it is supported with a flattened membrane like structure called as diaphragm, and in between of the two lungs we have a structure called as heart, and heart is the important vital organ. So what are the major functions that are performed by in the process of respiration? That is breathing or pulmonary ventilation, where drawing of atmospheric air into the and removing of CO2, rich alveolar air is releasing out. That is the first step. And the second process is diffusion of O2 and CO2 across the alveolar membrane. This is the second step. The third step is the transportation of oxygen and transportation of carbon dioxide. The transportation of oxygen simultaneously to the cells, and the transport of carbon dioxide from the cells to the lungs. And the fourth step, the diffusion of these two at the lung level and the tissue level, and utilization of O2 by the cells for catabolic reactions is the fifth step. And when you talk about the mechanism of breathing, breathing involves two stages. One is the inspiration and one is expiration. So here inspiration and expiration, in the process of inspiration and expiration, generally when you look onto this, in the process of inspiration, diaphragm is contracted and becomes flattened, and the rib and sternum is raised, and the volume of the thorax cavity is increased in the dorsiventral and anterior-posterior dorsiventral axis and anterior-posterior axis. And in the process of expiration, the diaphragm is relaxed and becomes a dome shaped. This is because of the differences in the atmospheric air. So in order to understand how this process of respiration takes place, we need to understand the simple terms called as the respiratory air, atmospheric air, alveolar air, blood, the amount of air, deoxygenated air in the blood, and the amount of oxygen in the oxygenated blood, and that part we need to come across. So here generally atmospheric air of oxygen is higher, and the alveolar air is pressure gradient, that is indicated by PO2, is generally less in the alveoli, and when you come to the deoxygenated blood, it is comparatively very less, and when you come to the oxygenated, that is the blood from the which is pure oxygenated, will be having more amount of oxygen. So here there exists a pressure gradient differences, and when you look onto the atmospheric air is comparatively very low, and it is very high compared to the atmospheric air in the alveoli, and it is generally more in the cells, and when you look onto the blood, it is almost whatever the position is there in the alveoli, it will be there. As a result, there is a pressure gradient differences occur. As a result, the lungs only are responsible for the creation of these pressure gradients. As a result, the blood will move in and out. And here we need to know about certain terms called as tidal volume. The tidal volume is the volume of air inspired or expired during a normal respiration. It is approximately 500 ml. That is, a healthy man can take approximately 6 liters to 8 liters or 6,000 to 800 milliliters per minute. And IRV, that is the inspiratory reserve volume, additional volume of air a person can inspire by forcible inspiration, that is approximately 2500 to 3000 ml. And expiratory reserve volume, that is the additional volume of air a person can expire by forcible expiration. This averages between 1000 ml to 1100 ml. And coming to the residual volume is a volume of air remaining in the lungs even after a forcible expiration. This averages 1100 ml to 1200 ml. By adding up a few respiratory volumes described above, one can understand the different pulmonary capacities, and this information, that is IRV, TRV, ERV, TV, all are responsible for the clinical information. And apart from this, we also have the inspiratory capacity, that is total volume of air a person can inspire after normal expiration is called as the tidal volume, that is 500 ml plus inspiratory reserve volume, that is approximately 2500 ml, means approximately 3000 ml. Expiratory capacity is the volume of air a person can expire after normal inspiration, that is 500 plus 1100, that is 1600 ml. and functional residual volume, that is ERV, expiratory reserve volume plus RV, that is residual volume. 1200 plus 2500, that is 1200 plus that is approximately near to 3500 to 4000 ml. And vital capacity, the maximum volume of air a person can breathe in after a forced expiration. This includes ERV, TV and IRV are the maximum volume, that is vital capacity is 2500 plus TV 500 plus IRV 1100, that is approximately ranges from 4500 to 5500 ml. And total lung capacity is vital capacity, that is 55 plus residual volume, that is 1200, that is approximately to 8 liters of 6000 to 8000 liters. So generally exchange of gases differs from the based on the differences between the partial pressures. Partial pressure is the amount of pressure exerted by a particular gas in the atmospheric air is called as partial pressure. The partial pressure of carbon dioxide is PCO2 is equal to 0.3 in the atmosphere, and it is PCO2 40 in the case of the lungs, alveoli of the lungs. And when you come to the PO2, that is the partial pressure of oxygen exerted in the atmospheric air is called, and it is 159 in the atmosphere, and it is approximately 104 to 105 in the lungs. So based on these differences, the movement of gases takes place and the exchange of gases takes place. So from the nose to the alveoli, the part is called as conduction part, breathing part, and from the alveoli to the tissues, that is called as exchange and conduction part. So here the alveoli is made up of the alveoli and the blood vessels are interconnected, and the diffusion process takes place through the three blood vessels, that is the thin squamous epithelium of the alveoli and endothelium of the alveolar capillaries and the basement substance which is connecting these two. So it is the most important bit in most of the examinations. And now the transport of gases. So when you look onto the transport of gases, blood is the medium of transport of gases of O2 and CO2. About 97% of the oxygen is transported by the RBC in the blood, and the remaining 3% of O2 is carried in a dissolved state through the plasma. Nearly 20 to 25% of the CO2 is transported by the RBC, and 70% is carried as bicarbonate, which is most important point. About 7% of the CO2 is carried in the dissolved state through the plasma. And when you come to the transport of oxygen, so here the conditions, it forms a sigmoid curve. The conditions favorable for the oxygen association are the conditions favorable for the dissociation of carbon dioxide, and the conditions favorable for the dissociation of oxygen, association of carbon dioxide are the conditions favorable for the dissociation of the oxygen. So here when the PCO2 is high, the oxygen associates, and when the PCO2 is low, high at the cells, the dissociation of oxygen occurs. So here if the PCO2, that is partial pressure of oxygen, is high, association, there only the dissociation of carbon dioxide occurs. And wherever the PO2 is low, the conditions of the PCO2 will be high, their dissociation of oxygen occurs. So in the vice versa process, along with that, carbon dioxide, when the oxygen is high, the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, the pH and the temperature will be low. And when the PCO2 is high, when the PO2 is low, the PCO2, the pH, and as well as the temperature will be high. So this is the basic funda to remember in the oxygen, and generally every 100 ml of oxygenated blood can be delivered around 5 ml of oxygen and 4 ml of carbon dioxide. But here carbon dioxide is mostly capable of combining with the blood, and in the hemoglobin we have 4 molecules, so 4 oxygen molecules can be carried by one hemoglobin molecule at time. And when the carbon dioxide is generally carried with the help of enzyme initiated process, and the enzyme responsible for that is called as carbonic anhydrase, where the bicarbonates or HCO3 ions are formed. And when you talk about the regulation of respiration, when the human beings have a significant ability to maintain and moderate the respiratory rhythm to suit the demands of the body tissues, this is done by the neural system. And here the pons varoli, medulla oblongata, which consists of chemosensitive area and respiratory rhythmatic center, are responsible for the identification of carbon dioxide and H plus ion, that is pH concentration, which sends the signal for the rhythm center to control the respiratory system. And generally when you talk about the disorders of the respiratory system, you can see that asthma, which is because of breathing problem because of inflammation of bronchi and bronchioles, and emphysema is a chronic disorder because of cigarette smoking, where the alveolar cavity is generally decreased. And you can also see that occupational respiratory disorder, in which this is generally caused mostly in the cement working or stone crushing industries, as a result where the lungs are filled with the alveolar cavity are filled with the silica. As a result, they may be feeling the respiratory disorders. And when you talk about the body fluids and circulation, so the most important blood is the most important transporter between the other systems. It is also called as a integrating system or combining system. Here blood is also called as a fluid connective tissue, and lymph is a white color fluid which is having only plasma and its proteins, a white color fluid which is meant for that. And generally blood is a connective tissue consisting of a fluid matrix, that is along with that plasma, and also the formed elements, that is the blood cells, that may be white blood cells or WBC cells. Generally when you talk about the plasma, 55% of the blood is generally composed of plasma, and 90%